Good evening and welcome to the Bellingham City Council regular meeting. Today is Monday, June 15th, 2026. Thank you all for joining us. So first, we're going to call the meeting to order and we will begin with roll call.
Holly Huffman.
Here.
Dan Hamill.
Here.
Skip Williams.
Here.
Lisa Anderson.
Here.
Michael Lilliquist.
Here.
Jace Cotton.
Here.
Hannah Stone.
Here.
All council members are present.
Thank you very much. So this evening, beginning with announcements and upcoming meetings, the Bellingham City Council meets all requirements of the State of Washington Open Public Meetings Act. Begin with the land acknowledgement. So before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. The Bellingham City Council provides Spanish interpretation at all regular evening meetings. Interpretation can be accessed by in-person attendees by utilizing the headsets that are located here at the front of the room. Remote viewers can log on to cob.org/CC-Zoom and click on the language icon at the bottom of the screen to listen in Spanish.
El Ayuntamiento de Bellingham ofrece interpretación al español en todas las reuniones vespertinas ordinarias. Los asistentes presenciales pueden acceder a la interpretación utilizando los auriculares ubicados en el frente de la sala. Quienes deseen participar de forma remota pueden conectarse a cob.org/cczoom y hacer clic en el icono de idioma en la parte inferior de la pantalla para escuchar en español.
So we have some upcoming public hearings that I wanted to make sure you were aware of. At our next meeting on July 13th, 2026, the City Council will hold two public hearings. One public hearing to consider an ordinance relating to the preservation of landmark trees, and the other public hearing will be on an ordinance relating to land use and zoning, amending multiple chapters in the Bellingham Municipal Code to adopt permanent zoning regulations to eliminate minimum automobile parking requirements and establish consistent bicycle parking standards citywide. More details can be found on meetings.cob.org 7 days prior to the hearing. So once again, our next council meeting will be on July 13th. So the first item we have this evening is actually also a public hearing. So this is Agenda Bill 24968, a public hearing to consider an ordinance relating to land use and zoning extending interim zoning regulations to eliminate minimum automobile parking requirements and establish consistent bicycle parking standards citywide. Emphasizing the interim since I just announced a public hearing for our next meeting to address permanent changes. This draft ordinance proposes a second 6-month extension of the interim parking ordinance with a proposed end date of January 28th, 2027. This extension will provide adequate time to conduct the Type 6 public review process as required for permanent amendments to the parking regulations in the Bellingham Municipal Code. Staff anticipates completing the code updates in late summer or early fall 2026, so that being this year. So before turning over the presentation, I'm first going to turn to Chris Behe, who's the Long-Range Planning Manager for the Planning and Community Development.
Thank you. Again, Chris Behe, Planning and Community Development. I just wanted to hand it off real quickly to Anya Gedrath, who's the planner who's been managing both the extension project and also the final code revisions, just to provide clarifying comments so that people aren't confused about what tonight's extension is and what the July 13th hearing that you just referenced is about. So I'll just hand it off to Anya.
Hi,
Hi, everyone. I'm Anya Gidrath, Long Range Planner with the Planning and Community Development Department. I just wanted to provide a little bit more staff context for tonight's item. So the reason for the requested second extension to the interim ordinance is to prevent a potential gap between the expiration of the interim regulations at the end of July and the adoption of permanent parking regulations. So staff has already drafted some proposed amendments to the Bellingham Municipal Code and initiated the Type 6 process to consider changes to car and bicycle parking. So those were brought to Planning Commission on June 4th at a public hearing that kicked off the Type 6 process. Planning Commission recommended approval. So those proposed amendments will be moving forward to City Council, as was mentioned, at the July 13th public hearing. And as was also mentioned, the extension of this will just allow adequate time for the permanent amendments to complete the Type 6 process with an anticipated adoption date of sometime in late summer or early fall. And also just to note that there's no proposed changes to the content of those temporary regulations since they were extended for the first time in November of 2025. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that ordinance extension request.
Thank you very much. That was going to be my clarifying question, whether there were any updates or changes to this particular ordinance that's up for consideration this evening, and you mentioned there are not, so thank you for that clarification. Any questions from council members before we open the public hearing? Clarifying items? No? Okay. I think we're set. Thank you very much. So we will open the public hearing. So again, at this time, members of the public are welcome to speak specifically to this item, which is again consideration of an ordinance relating to land use and zoning extending the interim zoning regulations to eliminate minimum automobile parking requirements and establish consistent bicycle parking standards citywide. Do we have anyone signed up?
Yeah, we had 4 individuals signed up. So first up, we have Adam Bellinger, Ned Vasquez, Susan Keene Ronning, and Carrie Burnside.
Good evening, council, members of staff, and mayor and community members. My name is Adam Bellinger. On the parking elimination for automobile minimums, I am a pretty strong supporter of a moderate pathway through this. I find that even a sensible idea applied to an extreme becomes destructive at a certain point. And I think not having any minimum standard for parking is one of those things. I've listened to the argument about how the elimination of the minimum will unlock unutilized space and the market will determine what is necessary. But we've seen the markets break down quite a few times recently and in the past. And I just have a hard time seeing how this, over the long run, can't end badly. If we follow the line of thinking that we need to eliminate all minimums, we should maybe think about eliminating bathroom requirements, bedroom requirements, kitchen minimums, because they're only utilized for a very short period of time throughout the day. But that's just not how people live. You know, we live with our cars for the most part. It's, you know, the fact that we're putting in a bike parking minimum is evidence that it's necessary, some level of minimum. And it's hard to get vehicle parking back once you take it away. I was supportive of, you know, doing a temporary elimination of the measure just to kind of see where the market might lie. But I do feel like for the equality, I'm using the word equality, of life for families with children, the elderly, and the disabled, it's necessary to have parking minimums. It's also an economic necessity for businesses. I'd like to note that Carly James, who became one of our newest port commissioner in Bellingham, she ran in large part because there wasn't adequate parking at her business at the Granary building. And so she ran for port commissioner to try and change that. And lo and behold, we're building parking right next to it. So I do strongly think that we need to take a middle of the road approach on this, for the long run. I know that there's a lot of push to just outright get rid of parking minimums, but I think we need to be more long-term thinking as to what the impacts are. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Good evening. I'm Ned Vasquez, the chair of the Mount Baker Group. Mount Baker Group of the Sierra Club supports parking reform in Bellingham. Reducing or removing parking minimums is an important strategy that can lower emissions, reduce impervious surfaces, and support walkability and climate resistance. At the same time, we are deeply concerned that Bellingham's housing affordability has continued to worsen. Median home prices have risen more than 60% since 2019. The home price to income ratio now exceeds 8-to-1, and median rents remain far above what low and moderate income households can afford. Rent burden in Bellingham is above 30%, meaning the typical renter spends more than 1/3 of their income on housing. These trends show that affordability is not improving on its own, even as new housing supply has increased. This is why pairing parking reform with affordability measures is so important. Reduced parking requirements can lower construction costs, but without clear affordability provisions, there is no mechanism to ensure that these savings reach the people most affected by our housing crisis. In fact, Washington cities that have removed parking minimums without affordability requirements did not see an increase in income-restricted homes. Everett is the one exception. Everett paired reduced parking requirements with affordability and is the only city in Washington where parking reform has contributed to more affordable units being built. This demonstrates that affordability does not happen automatically. It happens when cities choose to require it. Estimates suggest developers may save tens of thousands of dollars per parking space. Without affordability provisions or an in lieu contribution to the housing fund, those savings will be captured privately rather than supporting the public good. For these reasons, we urge the council to incorporate affordability into the permanent parking reform ordinance. This could include requiring a percentage of income-restricted units in developments that benefit from reduced parking requirements, or allowing developers to contribute an equivalent value into the Bellingham Housing Fund. If the ordinance is extended without amendments, we ask that the city move quickly to develop a parallel affordability strategy using density bonuses, height incentives, or other tools to ensure that parking reform contributes to housing affordability rather than exacerbating existing inequities. Sierra Club is committed to environmental sustainability and social equity. Parking reform paired with affordability advances both goals. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ned.
I'm Dr. Susan Kane Ronning. When the interim parking reform ordinance was passed, I provided public comments supporting the ordinance and requested that the council include affordability. The council chose to pass parking reform without affordability, so I'd like to discuss the impacts of your decision. The cost savings and development capacity unlocked by eliminating parking minimums must translate into more affordable housing units, not just market rate units or commercial development. This is one of the few policy levers that can reach the people stuck in the middle and forgotten, households earning between 50% and 100% of the area median income. The private market serves those above 100% AMI. Public subsidies often reach those below 50%. Zoning reform and targeted incentives are how we reach everyone in between, but only if we act intentionally. My own son earns a good salary in a professional job. His one-bedroom rent is $2,000, and he can no longer afford it. He's not an outlier. The ongoing threat of housing loss is one of the most significant drivers of harmful mental health outcomes for children. 1 in 4 working families in Bellingham cannot afford their basic needs. Whatcom County's own 2025 snapshot on homelessness confirms these challenges are persistent and worsening. The number sleeping unsheltered in tents, doorways, and vehicles actually increased. In 2025, 976 students, 1 in 12, were experiencing homelessness, a rate well above the Washington state average. Visits to the Bellingham Food Bank have more than doubled since 2020. The consequences for children are severe and lasting. Housing insecurity is associated with malnutrition, asthma, higher rates of depression and anxiety, more school suspensions and expulsions, and significant developmental and behavioral impacts that follow children into adulthood. Children who change schools even once during a school year are 4 times more likely to be chronically absent, with cascading effects on grades, graduation rates, and life outcomes. As a licensed psychologist, I have worked directly with children who lack housing and experience hunger. I see these outcomes in real faces. Your decisions impact these children. Expanding affordable housing supply can yield substantial benefits for children's mental health and long-term well-being. Parking reform gives this council a genuine tool to do that, if you choose to use it. This council has an opportunity to make parking reform mean something for the 1 in 12 students sleeping in cars, experiencing housing and security stress, for the working families who cannot afford their basic needs, and for the young professionals earning good salaries who still cannot make their rent. I am asking you to consider the experiences of children, families, and working individuals and extend
Thank you,
this
Susan. Your
ordinance
time is up.
with affordability. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Not as tall as I used to be. Good evening. My name is Carrie Burnside. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I do want to echo the sentiments of Ned and Dr. Susan Kane Roning, Ned with the Sierra Club. You've heard these things before. I've talked for years now about the need for affordability. You're aware that we have a deficit of, I believe it's $130 million a year to meet the need. $130 million a year. That's a lot of money that we have to find ways to come up with that. Shifting all that burden onto taxpayers is not a solution. We have an opportunity with this parking reform to include affordability, and I don't understand why you're ignoring that. I'm late tonight because I was spreading the ashes of a friend, and I started advocating for seniors because of him. He's lived in this community his entire life. He's worked hard. And at the end of his life, when he should have been able to retire and enjoy his life, he was cast aside by the city. His emails went unignored by city council and staff. And we time and time again choose to ignore opportunities where we can make a real difference in people's lives. I'm sorry, it's very fresh. I came right from doing that because it's really important that we start choosing differently and looking at how can we do this. Everett did include affordability with their parking reform. Parking reform is absolutely necessary, but we have to stop taking the easy road out. We have to actually look at what is possible and include affordability and include ways to meet that $130 million deficit everywhere possible. You're really letting your community down. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you, Carrie. Are there any other community members who would like to speak to this item for the public hearing?
We have one hand raised online.
Okay.
I can go. Jamin Agosti.
Thanks for letting me speak tonight. I just want to thank City Council for voting to take urgent action via emergency ordinance earlier last year. Since we took action, Olympia has agreed, and now state law requires that nearly every city in Washington follow Bellingham's lead to implement parking reform policies. We took action in Bellingham because we know that housing and transportation policy go hand in hand, and reducing the cost to develop housing is critically important in addressing the housing affordability crisis by producing more housing at every level in Bellingham. It's important that we think 30 to 50 years ahead and require builders provide a very inexpensive amenity when they do provide less parking, which is sufficient bike parking to accommodate the transportation mode shift that the city expects in 2030, 2040, and 2050, which will be the lifespan of these buildings that we expect will be built today, and include sufficient secure bike parking so that folks can choose to take different modes and that we can reap the benefit of this more comfortable density in Bellingham. I'm really excited to see the additional housing this will bring our neighbors and community members, and ask the City Council support the interim ordinance and the eventual permanent ordinance. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jamin. Any other speakers online? No. Okay. Seeing no other hands raised, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to council for discussion. Councilmember Cotton.
Well, first I want to thank staff for the hard work to bring forward permanent code changes here soon, and I see this as mostly a housekeeping item to get us between here and there. But also I'll just note on a separate topic, I think we'd all welcome the conversation about other ways to make it easier to build affordable units in Bellingham, and I know staff has had lots of conversations about that too. So I think this is one really important piece. We know the margins are very razor thin right now for a lot of developments. I think Old Town's sitting at 5%. Mercy Housing right next door is going to get to benefit from the same flexibility that we're providing. With that said, I look forward to a fuller discussion in a couple of weeks. And with that, I'll move to approve the ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Cotton and a second by Councilmember Hamel. Councilmember Hamel? No? Okay. Councilmember Lillquist and then Anderson.
I agree it's important to move this interim ordinance ahead because I'm interested in the July conversation. With regard to the final ordinance or the proposed final ordinance in July, is there a chance that that could be distributed earlier than the packet? I'm just wondering because I and maybe members of the community will want to look at that in some detail. Particularly, I'm going to want to compare it to the Everett ordinance or ways that we could or other communities have introduced affordability components in there. Is there a chance that that might be ready before the packet? And if so, would that be okay to distribute it a week early or whatever?
One thing I'll say is that I would recommend anyone who's interested take a look at the Planning Commission packet materials from June 4th from that public hearing. If there's any substantive changes, those will be brought forward, but that's a good starting place since Planning Commission did vote to recommend approval of the ordinance as written.
Did they propose any amendments, or is the version in the packet the one that will be coming forward to the council?
There was one proposed amendment to the draft ordinance, which was discussed in the public hearing, so that would be something to look at. There was a proposal to increase the ratios for a couple of the bike parking categories. Okay. But as far as publishing the packet early, I'm not as familiar with that.
Well, no, I think you probably answered my question. I know where to find it now, so does the public. Thank you, Ms. Gedrith.
Councilmember Anderson?
Well, I thought I'd ask for the information in advance, and if it's not available, I'll be asking it during at the hearing. I'm going to be really interested to see, since the emergency moratorium went forward, how many applications for development have come through, especially in the multifamily and the larger ones. Not as interested in the low density. I'm still trying not to call it single family. I also know that things like ADUs and stuff, the state has made those changes, so I'm not necessarily as interested in that data. But the things that our temporary decision has impacted, how many applications have come forward, and of that, what is the parking being proposed? And had this not been passed as a temporary ordinance, what would have the parking been required? So there's the comments that have been that developers will right-size the need, but there's also the other side where for years, when like I tried to get a disabled parking in front of someone's house over in the Puget neighborhood, the planning director at the time kept saying that, you know, it's not necessarily to be used privately or, you know, for that homeowner, that, you know, parking is never free and it's externalized onto our taxpayers and at the city cost. So I'd like to be able to see how much potential externalizing that onto the taxpayers and city cost. You know, if we're saving developers money, how much is that going to cost our public in street parking? Not that I expect you to have that number. I'll quantify it myself with some research, but I'd like to know what those numbers are. And if I could have that before the meeting, I would greatly appreciate it. If not, I will be asking for that to be brought either to the meeting or provided for a follow-up meeting.
Councilmember Huffman?
This is going to be a relatively short conversation compared to the one that we'll have in about a month, I'm sure, and expect a lot more input from the community as well. And I just want to speak to those who have spoken tonight and reach out with my understanding, the desperation, and the fact that this really is a life or death issue when it comes to housing. This is one small element of that, of course, but I think in my conversations with people, we're all feeling very desperate to address this issue and have been for a long time. There are only so many levers that the city can pull. I think that we're being really thoughtful at reviewing those and looking at the details and the potential impacts. But really at the heart of it, I know that the motivation is we want to see as many people in this community housed as possible. Some of us have slightly different ideas about exactly what the best method to do that is. But I just want to reach out and say, I'm with you. I know that a lot of us here are with you as well. And hopefully all working together, we can find those best solutions and move as quickly as possible to get more people housed in our community.
Other comments from council members? If not, we have a motion before us by Councilmember Cotton and a second by Councilmember Hamel. The motion is to approve the ordinance for first and second reading. So again, this is regarding the interim zoning regulations with the note that at our next meeting on July 13th, there will be additional discussion about potential changes and permanent regulations. So at this time, a motion to approve the interim zoning regulations. All in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, seeing none, that passes 7-0. Next, we have appointments.
Good evening, Council, members of the community, and staff that are here tonight. I have 2 appointments for Council's information. They are appointments to the Tourism Commission, and that is, I will be appointing Kimberly Anderson and Katie Willis to their first terms on the Tourism Commission.
Move approval?
So these are for information only.
Just information tonight.
Okay, thank you for that. If you want to proceed with the mayor's report.
Sure. For Mayor's Report tonight, I wanted to begin by saying that this week I will be announcing details of my latest executive order directing city action to expand economic opportunity, to strengthen the city center, support business and entrepreneurs, and build the partnerships needed to make Bellingham more prosperous and affordable for all. This order follows and builds upon my last, which directed city resources towards expanding housing options for all income levels and household types. Housing is just one part of the affordability equation. Another essential element is family wage jobs. The order acknowledges that many of the qualities that make Bellingham so desirable also contribute to its status among it being the least affordable small cities in our country. To be a truly prosperous community, both now and in the future, we need more job opportunities supporting the people who make Bellingham their home. And to create these jobs, we need a welcoming environment, one that reduces hurdles to entrepreneurship and local economic development. With this executive order, I am affirming our commitment to create pathways for economic activity and not unnecessary barriers to start, to grow, or to invest here. The city is committed to being an active, enthusiastic, and accessible partner to local businesses and entrepreneurs. It also commits us to moving forward strategic actions alongside the port, Whatcom County, our downtown partnership, and our local institutions for higher education. And it invites all of us to advance economic vitality together. For those businesses who choose to put their confidence in Bellingham, my message is, Bellingham is open for business. We are here to help and work together on behalf of all of those people who call this place home, taking the action required to realize the full potential of Bellingham's economy and establish this city as a model for urban vitality, opportunity, and quality of place in the Pacific Northwest. I will be presenting about the executive order at the Whatcom County Business and Commerce Committee this Wednesday morning, and I invite council members and the public to tune in and learn more. Next in Mayor's Report, we held our ceremonial flag raising honoring Juneteenth this morning on the Flag Plaza at City Hall. Juneteenth is the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the end of slavery in the United States. It commemorates June 19th, 1865, when Union troops arrived in Galveston, Texas, to announce freedom to those who were enslaved more than 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. African American communities across the country have celebrated this day of freedom ever since. Juneteenth, which is June 19th, is a City of Bellingham as well as state and federal holiday. This morning's flag raising kicks off a number of community events this week designed for celebration, for reflection, and opportunities for service. And last but not least, our Whatcom 911 call center experienced a disruption to dispatch services this afternoon. Disruptions that appeared throughout the state and nation. Importantly, service was restored this evening just before 6 p.m. I want to sincerely thank our Whatcom 911 team for their swift response and public notification when this disruption was detected. Less than 5 minutes from the time they were first notified about the issue, they had started delivering public notifications to the community about alternative methods for reaching emergency responders. We are all grateful for their swift, life-saving response under these circumstances. And that's the end of Mayor's Report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Lund. The next item on the agenda is council assignment reports. So again, this is a standing time for council member reports from assigned committees, boards, or other groups. I don't know if anyone, Councilmember Huthman?
I have a small one. I am the council liaison to the Mount Baker Theater Board. This position is new to me, but I will note that Councilmember Williams was on the Mount Baker Theater Board for 15 years, I believe.
Not by design.
But so I very much appreciate this position. It's been really wonderful. And I just wanted to note that they are kicking off their centennial year, and so the theater is 100 years old. I believe I had the date. It was opened in April of 1927. April 27th, or April 29th, 1927. And I think hopefully most of us have been in the Mount Baker Theater, but if you haven't, this is a great opportunity to experience that amazing building. It's such an incredible asset to the city in multiple ways. It's really just such a stunning theater with amazing programming and so well maintained. We should really be proud of this facility. And so I just welcome everybody to check out their website, see what they've got planned for the next year of programming, consider buying a ticket to something maybe you wouldn't have considered before, and have that experience. So, yeah, that's all for me.
Councilmember Lillquist?
Yeah, I will report that I'm a liaison to the Community Development Advisory Board, or CDAB. They had their meeting last week. I'm going to cover their 4 agenda items in reverse order, just because I think it works better that way. First of all, they reviewed the 2026 Action Plan for Housing. This is the annual plan that goes with a 5-year consolidated plan, which HUD requires cities to do. We use it to program on federal monies, but also our own local monies. That was one item. Another item was a presentation on the home sharing program, which the council heard about this afternoon. So you want to hear more about the home sharing program. Basically, it's a program where if you have a spare bedroom, you can, through this city-sponsored coordinated service, reach an agreement with someone to share your house. We have thousands of bedrooms that are not going used. We also have thousands of people who are looking for places to live, and this is a way of securely and openly and creating that connection. The CDAB board also reviewed the rules and responsibilities and roles for board members. And finally, what I really want to talk about is the city's home rehabilitation program, which is a great program that the council, I'm sure, knows about, the public should know about. This basically is a very low interest loan program, 1% in most cases, to low-income people, seniors, disabled, veterans. These people are given priority for necessary repairs and improvements to their house if their home is in danger of falling below certain livability requirements, anything that affects safety, such as railings or leaks or lead paint abatement, things like that. If there is money left over, it's also available for slightly less low-income people, up to 80%, just above 80% AMI, still lower income. Very successful program. It's a revolving loan fund. So people get considerable amounts of money to make these necessary repairs. It's paid back with a 1% interest rate, and then that money can then be used to fund other houses for necessary repairs to keep their houses livable. It's basically, well, first of all, it's a good service to the community members who may need ADA improvements or roofing replacements. But it's also very important for housing affordability in the sense that losing a house means there's one less house there. So preserving the housing you have, low-income housing you already have, is one of the best ways of ensuring that there is affordable housing for low-income people. So that's a home rehabilitation program. You can find out more about it at the City of Bellingham's website. And that's my report from CDAB.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Anderson and then Ham.
Thank you. Not going to speak necessarily for Councilmember Williams in case he wants to expand upon it, but he also attended a meeting with me as council representatives to the Lake Whatcom Advisory. We met on Wednesday, June 3rd. Previously, a month before that, I had submitted a bunch of questions to one of the managers of DNR about land management and our forestry plan, which is over 20 years old. a lot of that information, it was very thoughtful. They had spent quite a bit of time writing up reports based on, or reporting back based on those questions. Those questions and answers were shared with the advisory, the Lake Whatcom Advisory Commission. And then Councilmember Galloway from County Council and I had additional questions that we had proposed before the meeting that had covered a lot of areas of lake quality, also the forestry management plan, some questions on things that came out of committee that we had requested, like some progress information about how the county is addressing some of their, the old stormwater for individual housing. Once permits are issued, they're put in place. There's not necessarily an inspection over time to make sure that they're still in compliance. So we covered some of that information. There was a lot more questions that were generated that would be more trying to focus on policy, because our job is to try to develop recommendations of policy that we bring back to our respective councils, along with a couple other entities that are that also work with us. So it was a good meeting. There's a lot more work to do, but we did, we would have had a meeting in August, and it got rescheduled because there's a lot of conflict with staff and other things going on. So it was rescheduled, I believe, for, instead of the first week of August, it'll be Tuesday, September 1st will be a meeting, and then we're actually planning a field trip where we'll, hopefully we'll have members of DNR, and we've kind of listed some areas that we're interested. There's a couple proposed cuts, so we might tour that, but also some other areas that were requested to perhaps look at is some of the land that the city has purchased, some of our forestry practices that are being implemented. We have crews that are doing work now, but also being able to take a look at roads and culverts, and basically kind of get a good layout of what's ahead based on the city and the county has taken over substantial land that we will be managing. And so I know for myself, I've got a lot of questions about how we're going to be able to do that well, resources needed, and overall what the impacts will be on our drinking water. So it was a good meeting, but we didn't move the needle too far, but at least staff have a good idea of the direction some of us on the committee would like to pursue.
Yeah, just to add, at the end of the meeting, and the bottom line is the discussion is basically going to determine whatever priorities we feel that the group feels needs to be addressed, but it's also got to be balanced with the resources we have to make that happen. And how those decisions or how those concerns meet with the requirements of people above us, state level, and all of that. So it's going to be a lot of work, and but in the end, we will make a decision and make those recommendations to our bodies, the county, us here, and the water district in Sudden Valley. So,
Thank you. Councilmember Hamel?
Thank you, Council President. So I serve on the Emergency Medical Services Oversight Board along with the Mayor and Chief Hewitt. EMS Oversight Board largely oversees the management of the current levy and how those funds are spent. Those are voter-approved dollars. I also serve on the EMS levy, the current EMS levy committee that will be working towards a levy in 2028. I serve on the Regional Fire Authority Levy Committee along with the Mayor and Chief Hewitt. What I want to do is, the next meeting is to provide a more comprehensive overview of what those groups do. There's a lot of work going into this. I'm on my second meeting with all three of those groups. I feel like I'm still the new person. I'm trying to really sift through and leaning on the expertise of the folks that are in the room, including fire commissioners and people who have been doing this for a lot longer than I have. I also serve on the Behavioral Health Committee for the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force. That group meets tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. It's a public meeting. It's a Zoom meeting. Please feel free to attend. You can find that on, the Whatcom County website. Just look up behavioral health for the task force. And I also serve on the Justice Project Oversight and Planning Committee, and that group will be meeting at 2 p.m. this coming Thursday. And just finally, to wrap up, Bellingham Public Library, I'm the liaison from the council, and that group meets tomorrow morning at 3:30. And that's a public meeting, and everyone is welcome to attend as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other updates from assignments? No? Okay. Then we will move forward with committee meeting reports. So these are reports from committee meetings that took place earlier today. We started this afternoon with Public Works and Natural Resources at 1 o'clock, and that was chaired by Councilmember Lillquist. So I'll turn to him for a report.
Thank you, Council President Stone. We had two items. I'll present them in the order that we discussed them. The first is an update on the comprehensive sewer plan and also on emerging solids handling technology. Solids in the sewer, that's what we're referring to. Staff provided an overview of the comprehensive sewer plan update and described how this work supports long-term wastewater system planning, infrastructure investment, and future solids management evaluation. Staff provided an overview of the proposed community engagement approach to be coming up in the next few months and discussed how changing technologies, emerging contaminants of concern, and evolving regulations are shaping wastewater planning efforts across the country, not just here in Bellingham. The presentation provided context on how the city is planning for the future while remaining reliable and compliant wastewater operations today. The conversation was embedded in what was described as a broader conversation across the country and across the industry in wastewater sewage treatment. Basically, there's recognition that sewage waste is complex and has toxins in it that are not well handled by older technologies, but that newer technologies also are problematic, either in their reliability or their commonness or their expense or their effectiveness. There's a lot of uncertainties that are known. It was mentioned by staff that sewage treatment is a complex process involving very long-lived and expensive facilities governed by state laws that safeguard public health and the environment. Planning for a sewage system is a long-term process that requires forward thinking, including consideration for projected population growth as adopted in our comprehensive plan, and that sewage treatment plants must meet continuous operation and reliability without fail. It's a 24/7 operation, and there's no way around that. The comprehensive sewer plan itself is the document which does that long-range planning. It talks about the things you might expect, like the pipes and the pumps and the capacity for all parts of the sewage collection system, all the way down to the treatment plant. It talks about aging infrastructure with the finite lifespan of each component, whether it's a pipe or the sewage treatment plant. And it also, comprehensive sewer plan will talk about the capital investment calendar, a year-by-year description of what would need to be done, and also how much that would cost and how that might be financed through the rates. The comprehensive sewer plan is not, however, a final decision document on facility design, nor is it designed to replace the at-the-moment engineering decisions and design decisions that we made at the time when new improvements are made or projects are adopted. It was discussed that future decisions for sewage treatment plant will be guided by many different considerations, including technical, operational, financial, and also community priorities and values. All those things will be included in the considerations for sewage treatment planning. And with regard to community priorities and evaluation, one of the next steps is a public engagement process, a process to discuss the long-term plans and goals that we'd like to see for sewage treatment, both from a public safety and health perspective and an environmental perspective. There then was an additional discussion having to do with a particular issue with regard to the solids handling portion of the sewage treatment process. Solids handling is seen as a field undergoing significant change, both technically and in terms of regulations, and considerable uncertainty across the industry. If there was an obvious and easy and best solution, we'd be adopting it. Staff discussed 2 examples of technologies that are being investigated, both their pros and their cons. For example, city staff and members of our community have visited a gasification facility. Earth Care operates it in Bethel, Pennsylvania. It has been successfully processing agricultural waste and is now processing municipal waste at a smaller scale. It is a private operation rather than a municipal operation, so it's not run by a city. It accepts treated sewage, digested municipal waste solids from other communities, so it's not necessarily a 24/7, all day, every day reliability operation. It does go down for maintenance, and then it can accept deliveries again. One of the key differences was noted is that gasification does successfully process municipal waste solids, but these are digested municipal waste solids rather than what the city deals with, which is undigested ones. We actually canceled our biodigestion program for various complicated reasons. Another example discussed was local. In Edmonds, the city of Edmonds began at least 10 years ago a process to create a gasification facility to handle their municipal solids. Unfortunately, that program has been plagued by difficulties, largely due to site constraints. It is now still 4 years behind schedule and not in full operation. The challenge for them has been controlling the consistency of the feedstock that goes into the gasifier. If you have reliable feedstock, the process is sort of self-reinforcing and operates very nicely. If you don't control the feedstock, the process shuts down. And again, we're looking for reliability. It was noted that one of the contaminants of concern that's been talked about for years, in recent years, is PFAS, the so-called forever chemicals, and that Edmonds estimates the destruction of their PFAS with an additional RTO high temperature post-exhaust treatment is up to 90 or 95% destruction of PFAS. It should be noted that the RTO process, that high temperature emissions control, is part of the city's emissions control process that we're initiating right now. So we will be adding an RTO process as well, which should help control emissions of many kinds and presumably also help with PFAS. This was simply an informational and discussion meeting this morning for the committee, and as I said, please look out for a public engagement process over the next few months. The second item was a return item for the City Council. It was a resolution adopting the 2027-2032 Transportation Improvement Program, or the TIP. This is the six-year TIP is a transportation planning and funding document. The city adopts the 6-year plan annually, so we roll it forward every year, covering a 6-year period, and it covers city capital projects that improve and maintain Bellingham's multimodal transportation network. The City Council held a public hearing on the draft 6-year TIP at our previous meeting on June 1st. We had a work session on it to discuss any further issues. The city is required to submit an updated 6-year TIP to the state by July 1st, and so we're hoping for approval tonight. This afternoon, the committee unanimously recommended approving the resolution adopting the 2027-2032 6-year Transportation Improvement Program, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Anderson. Any discussion? Councilmember Lillquist.
I forgot to mention there was one change that was made from the hearing, which is that there is a program in the TIP, a new program that has to do with citywide bike rack installation. It is a relatively small program, but it's a program specifically for funding bike rack installation. There are 2 sections in the TIP, one for ongoing programs and one for projects. That program was in the project section. It's been moved up to the program section. So that was one change from the hearing.
Any other discussion or items for this before we call the vote? Okay. Seeing none. All in favor will say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Seeing none, that passes 7-0.
End of committee report.
Great. So the next committee this afternoon was Community and Economic Development, and that committee is chaired by Councilmember Cotton, so I'll turn it over to him for a report.
Thank you, Council President. I'm joined on that committee by Councilmembers Huffman and Williams, although all council members were present and participating. We had one agenda item for information discussion only, which was a presentation on the Bellingham Home Share Program. Councilmember Lilliquist, a little bit mad at you for stealing my thunder, but the city of Bellingham has implemented a new home sharing program that connects homeowners who have extra bedrooms with good fit renters. And the program is in partnership with Nesterly and is helping increase our community's existing housing supply by turning underutilized bedrooms into successful living arrangements. We have an estimate that there may be upwards of 4,000 underutilized bedrooms in the city. And so this is a really cost-effective way for us to offer supportive rental options that build social connections, increase financial independence, and including helping people age in place. If you think this might be a solution for you, I would encourage you to visit the city's website or email homeshare@cob.org. And the presentation should be available soon for those who want to learn more. End of committee report.
Thank you very much. After that, we had a brief committee of the whole meeting consisting of old and new business. Any items for old and new business this evening? I have one item that I was hoping to request staff time from council, well, authorization from council for staff time to work with Iris Knott, our legislative policy analyst. So as you may or may not be aware, the Port of Bellingham passed a resolution advancing community protection and civil rights at Port of Bellingham facilities, restricting the use of Port of Bellingham property for civil immigration enforcement purposes and activities. That was passed by the port recently, and in addition, at the county council, there was an ordinance proposed at their last meeting on June 9th that will be taken up for a vote next week on the 23rd. This is an ordinance imposing an interim moratorium on the acceptance or processing of applications and permits for the establishment of new or expansion of existing civil detention facilities. And so through a discussion, Councilmember Cotton joined me. We met with council members Reenstra and Scanlon to talk about these in particular, and it was noted that the county ordinance would only apply to unincorporated areas, so it doesn't include the entire county, so it would not include the city of Bellingham or the small cities. So I was hoping to look at these two, the resolution and ordinance, hopefully not recreate the wheel, but look at what might be possible here within the city and whether that's something that we would want to take on or not. I haven't had a chance to review that in great detail yet, but wanted to see if there was support from the council to work with Iris on that. Okay, great. I appreciate it. Hopefully that will not be extensive time required, and then just reporting out to the community that this afternoon we just spoke briefly during old and new business about the upcoming appointment of council lobby team members. So that will be brought forward at the next meeting for either ranked choice voting or arm wrestling, or we'll see, to come up with three names to help represent the council in our lobby efforts down in Olympia. So that will be coming soon. There are no other items for old and new business. We did have several executive session items and several requiring action this evening. So the first item was a potential property acquisition comprehensive update. So this item was with Peril Skin. Staff provided information on potential property acquisitions, but this was for information and discussion only. There was no action taken. The second item was potential litigation. So this item was with Chaplin and Cram. Staff provided information on a potential litigation matter. Action coming forward is to entertain a motion to authorize the mayor to enter into litigation against various federal agencies regarding federal grant conditions. Approval.
So moved.
Second.
Doing that. Okay, so motion from Councilmember Huthman and a formal second, I guess, from Councilmember Cotton. Any discussion on that item? Okay, seeing none, all in favor will say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, seeing none, that passes 7-0. The next item is a potential litigation matter. This was with CRAM. Staff provided information on a potential litigation matter with the following action coming forward. To entertain a motion to authorize the mayor to enter into an indemnification agreement with Mercy Housing regarding the Holly Street landfill site.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Cotton. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor will say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Seeing none, that passes 7-0. Final item was also a potential litigation matter. This was with Chaplin and Cram. Staff provided information on a potential litigation matter. The following action coming forward. To entertain a motion to authorize the mayor to retain outside counsel to represent the city in antitrust litigation against certain fire truck manufacturers.
Move approval. Second.
Motion by Councilmember Anderson and a second by Councilmember Huthman. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that passes 7-0. Okay. Next, we have consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second. Motion from Councilmember Hamel and a second by Councilmember Huthman. I just wanted to note that with respect to the first item on the consent agenda, this is 24964, a grant award from the Bureau of Justice Assistance for the Bulletproof Vest Partnership Program. Just confirming that I received information from legal after review, just confirming that there were no stipulations required to acceptance of those grant funds related to DEI or gender identity or immigration or other federal restrictions that are currently in litigation. So with that confirmation, feel confident moving forward. Any other discussion or items for the consent? Okay. If not, all in favor will say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Seeing none, that passes 7-0. Next, we have final consideration of ordinances, and this is an item that was added and coming back before the deputy clerk reads the title. I just wanted to note, since there's been a passage of some time since this last came forward, just noting that at the conclusion of a closed record hearing on May 18th, 2026, the City Council performed first and second reading of a street vacation ordinance for the eastern one half of First Street, abutting the petitioner's property at 3702 Silver Beach Avenue. The ordinance presented to the council included a requirement to reserve a small area within the subject right-of-way being vacated for a public sewer main cleanout as follows. So it was Section 2, the city reserves a utility easement for an existing public sewer main cleanout as legally described. It said in Exhibit D and depicted in Exhibit E. So those two exhibits were actually placeholders in our last packet on May 18th. So since the closed record hearing, the petitioner coordinated with the Public Works Department to determine the exact location of the cleanout so that it could be described and depicted in Exhibits D and E. Initially, Public Works operations staff could not locate the cleanout in the field. Further site exploration with use of the city's historic utility maps was conducted, and eventually the cleanout was found to be located further to the west than represented on city IQ mapping. Public Works staff then determined that there is sufficient space within the remaining western portion of First Street to access the cleanout such that an easement encroaching into the vacated right-of-way is no longer necessary. Accordingly, the easement reservation language has been removed from Section 2 of the ordinance, and so third and final reading of the subject street vacation ordinance can now proceed per protocol. So I just didn't want to go straight to the third and final since there was a little bit more to that and some delay since the first and second, which was on May 18th. But any questions? That was just the cleanup from the closed record hearing. So at this time, we could move forward with third and final if there's nothing further. So I'll let you read the title. It's not in our printed packet. It was added, but was in the online packet. Yeah.
Agenda Bill 24940, an ordinance relating to the vacation of the eastern one-half, 15 feet of First Street, abutting the western 110 feet block of Block 13, Silver Heights, add to Whatcom in Bellingham, Whatcom County, Washington.
Move third and file.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilmember Hamel and a second by Councilmember Huffman. Any discussion? Councilmember Cotton?
Just a note for the public that the abutting property and right-of-way are not within the Lake Whatcom watershed. That was a question.
Great, thank you. Any other discussion or questions? Okay, seeing none, roll call, please.
Holly Huffman.
Aye.
Dan Hamel.
Aye.
Skip Williams.
Aye.
Lisa Anderson.
Aye.
Michael Lillquist.
Aye.
Jace Cotton.
Aye.
Hannah Stone.
Aye.
The motion passes 7-0.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so with that, that item was added on June 8th, so, but was available online. Wonderful, so with that, that concludes the regular business of the meeting, and we will now move to the public comment period. So if you're watching live online or on BTV, the broadcast will now end. However, you can continue watching via Zoom at cob.org/CC-Zoom or listen via phone by dialing 253-215-8782 and entering meeting ID 871-5188-5205 and password 9. Again, that's cob.org/CC-Zoom or dial 253-215-8782 and enter meeting ID 871-5188-5205 and password 9 to continue to watch or listen live. If you're watching a recorded version of this meeting, you can view public comment videos at meetings.cob.org.